Now that you had an introduction to what Ionic 2 is and the prerequisites of this course, it's time to get started. And what better way to get started than to install Ionic 2 and create our first application. For this, we will first need to install Node.js. Now, Node.js is a server-side language, and no worries, we're not going to develop any server-side application in this course. But we will need Node.js for two reasons. The major reason is that we will use npm, Node's package manager, which is kind of the de facto package management tool when we talk about front-end development or app development here. So this will be a tool we use to install the dependencies our projects need. For example, Angular 2. In fact, this will be done automatically for us, but still we will need this package installed. And we will need Node.js itself because the Ionic framework or the Ionic toolset we will use also ships with a little development server, which allows us to preview our app in the browser. You will see this in a second. And for this, it needs Node.js to spin up a simple development server. So make sure to download the latest version here, 7.4 in my case, though 6.9 should also work, but you should be on the safe side by picking the latest one. Simply download it, walk through the installer, and once the installation finished, you have Node.js and npm installed and you're ready to continue with the next steps. The next step takes us to the command line or terminal. There we need to install Ionic and Cordova. This step has only to be executed once, and you will need to do that to get the Ionic CLI, the toolset, which then allows you to create Ionic projects and so on. To install Ionic and Cordova, we will use npm, so you can type npm. This command is now available since you installed Node.js. npm install, and then we need Ionic and Cordova, these two packages. Make sure to add the -g flag at the end to get the or to install it globally, I should say, so that you can execute the Ionic command from anywhere on your machine. And on Windows you can hit enter. On Mac and Linux you probably need to add a sudo in front of it to get the right permissions. After hitting enter, you might be prompted to enter a password, and thereafter the installation will begin. Now this can take a couple of minutes or at least quite some time, and I'll be back once it's finished. So the installation finished on my machine, and with that we're ready to create our first Ionic 2 project and therefore our first application. Make sure to navigate into a folder where you want to create the project. Here in my case I am already in such a folder. You can then run Ionic. This command is now available since you globally installed Ionic. Ionic start will create a new project. Then you simply enter your project name. This can be first app, for example, or whichever name you want to use. Now you could hit enter, but that would give you an Ionic 1 project. We want to create an Ionic 2 project using Angular 2 though. Therefore we need to add --v2 as a flag. Now with this, hit enter, and this will create a new folder, the first app folder, and it will create your first project, initiate all the dependencies and so on, and it will take a couple of seconds, and thereafter we're ready to view our first created application. See you in a second. The project setup process finished here on my machine, and with that I can now navigate into this newly created folder, so cd first app, and in there you can now run Ionic serve. The serve command is another command offered by the Ionic CLI, and it will compile your application to JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, not to a native app yet. I will later show you how to do this. And then it will spin up a little development server running at the address you see here, which will host your application. Sounds strange? Well, more about that in a second. Let's view our app first. Here it is. In this browser window here, it automatically opened this window. If it doesn't do that for you, navigate there manually. It shows our first Ionic app. And this is just a default starter project the Ionic CLI creates. We will later learn how to create empty projects. Now, this certainly looks strange, seeing a mobile, in quotation marks, app run in the browser. And keep in mind, it is no mobile app yet. It's a JavaScript, CSS, HTML app. We haven't compiled it to a native app yet. The great thing is, this browser window, this app running in the browser, is a great place to test your application because it will watch your files. This process here keeps running and will automatically recompile whenever you change something, and therefore you have a quick and easy way of seeing your application and testing new features. That being said, you of course won't be able to test features like the device camera and so on, but again, we will later learn how to test on native devices and how to ship it on native devices, but generally, you typically use that browser app to develop the majority of your application because it's so fast, so easy to debug, and such a great tool for development. Now, again, it looks strange like this, but in Chrome, which I recommend using, you can open up your developer tools. And there you have this device mode here, which you can toggle by clicking on this mobile phone, iPad like icon here. This will switch to device mode, and now it looks much more like an application running on a device. Here you can even choose which device you want to simulate. Make sure to reload the page if you switch the device. And then you see how the app will look like on the device. Now that being said, it's not a 100% correct emulation, it's still in the browser in the end, but it gives you a pretty good feeling of how it will look and work like in the end. And it also switches between the iOS style and the material design for Android if you switch the device, as you can see by the icons here at the bottom and the click effect when I click on it. So this is pretty powerful, and it does more than just switch these styles. It really emulates a mobile phone as far as a browser can do that. So this will actually be the mode we will work in the majority of the course, just because it's so easy to debug and to work with. And with that, I'd say we got our first application, we got a couple of tabs here. Now, let's change something about this application to really get a feeling on how to work with Ionic 2.